One of my favorite things to do is asking questions to people who believe in evolution. So I asked this professor if I could ask him some questions about the Big Bang. He said, sure, what would you like to know? I said, well, sir, you told me 20 billion years ago all the matter in the universe was squished in this little tiny dot. And it was spinning faster and faster and exploded. I said, where did all this matter come from? He said, well, we don't know that for sure. I said, okay, now, sir, hold it. If I told you that I believe about 6,000 years ago God created the heaven and the earth, like the Bible teaches, you're going to say, and where did God come from? And I don't know. But you said 20 billion years ago there was a Big Bang, and you don't know where the dirt came from. So basically, I believe in the beginning God, and you believe in the beginning dirt. Don't tell me my theory is religious and yours is science. Oh, no, sir, they're both religious. The news media tries to make it look like it is religion versus science. I did a debate in El Paso, Texas here recently, and the news media wrote an article. They said, religious and scientific leaders debate evolution. What is the unspoken message in that title? What are they trying to imply? Can you catch that? They're trying to imply that evolution is part of science, aren't they? No, evolution is a religion. Actually, both creation and evolution are inherently religious. I said, well, sir, would you please tell me where the laws came from? The universe is run by laws, gravity, centrifugal force, inertia. Who gave the laws? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could you tell me where the energy came from? You know, it takes energy to make a Big Bang. Who bought the gas to run this machine anyway? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could I ask you another question? He said, sure. What else would you like to know? What do you mean else? You haven't told me nothing yet. I said, does Berkeley have a merry-go-round? How many of you know what a merry-go-round is? You go round, round, round till you puke, okay? He said, no, we don't have a merry-go-round at Berkeley. I said, you ought to get one. You could learn some good science on a merry-go-round. We're going to spin the merry-go-round clockwise. The kids are going to go through 4 phases. They start off in phase 1. They're screaming at the football players. Come on, let's go, faster, faster. Can't you go any faster? You get up around 30 miles an hour, the kids enter phase 2, where they stop screaming. They just quietly concentrate on trying to hang on for dear life. You get up around 60 miles an hour, the kids enter phase 3, where they start screaming again. But now they're screaming, stop, stop, please, slow down. Don't stop, though, keep going faster and faster. When you get to about 100 miles an hour, you should enter phase 4. That's where the kids begin to fly off the merry-go-round. Now, when this happens, you will notice a very interesting phenomena of physics. If the merry-go-round is going clockwise, when the kid flies off, the kid will be spinning clockwise until he encounters resistance, like a tree or telephone pole. That's because of a law in physics known as the conservation of angular momentum. You see, if a spinning object breaks apart in a frictionless environment, the fragments will all spin the same direction. It's very simple. It's because the outside is moving faster than the inside. And so it keeps the same direction of spin. The professor said, yes, I understand about the conservation of angular momentum. I said, well, good. I'd like to ask you a question then, sir. If the whole universe began as a swirling dot, like you said, why do 2 planets spin backwards? He said, that's interesting. I said, no, that's more than interesting. It's kind of hard on your Big Bang theory. Not only that, 6 of the moons are spinning backwards. Why? He said, I don't know. Why do you think they're going backwards? I was hoping he was going to ask that. I said, well, sir, I believe it's very simple. You see, I believe in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and God did it that way on purpose, just to make the Big Bang theory look stupid.
Perhaps the most damaging blow to Darwin's theory is the fossil record. If all living organisms have descended from the same primitive life form, then the rock strata of the Earth should be filled with the fossilized remains of animals that were once part of a great evolutionary chain. A chain of small biological modifications, ultimately leading to a spectacular diversity of life. Yet, after 2 centuries of research, highlighted by excavations in southern China, the multitude of transitional experiments, or missing links, that should exist are conspicuous only by their absence. The most graphic example of this void in the fossil record is a geological era known as the Cambrian Explosion.
The branching tree pattern of Darwin's theory is actually not seen anywhere in the fossil record unless we impose it with our own minds. So the Cambrian Explosion is the most dramatic refutation of the tree of life.
The Cambrian Explosion of life was a dramatic episode in geological history. Usually dated at about 530 million years ago, the exquisitely preserved Cambrian fossils reveal that the body plans for virtually every major animal phyla appeared, not gradually and slowly as Darwin had speculated, but instead with astonishing suddenness.
If we imagine the whole history of life on Earth taking place in one 24-hour period, the current standard estimates for the origin of life put it at about 3.8 billion years ago, let's say 4 billion. So if we start the clock then, our 24-hour clock, 6 hours, nothing but these simple single-celled organisms appear, the same sort that we saw in the beginning. 12 hours, same thing. 18 hours, same thing. 3/4 of the day has passed, and all we have are these simple single-celled organisms. Then at about the 21st hour, in the space of about 2 minutes, boom, most of the major animal forms appear in the form that they currently have in the present. And many of them persist to the present, and we have them with us today. Less than 2 minutes out of a 24-hour period. That's how sudden the Cambrian explosion was.
In a geological instant, the animal kingdom leaped from small, relatively simple organisms to extraordinary creatures with spinal cords, compound eyes, and articulated limbs. The record of this explosion of life looks nothing like Darwin's slowly branching tree.
Darwin's theory is that there's a tree of life, where you have one organism diverging into many other organisms and big differences appearing at the top. What we really see is from here up. This does not exist in the fossil record. If I were using a botanical illustration, it would be a lawn with separate blades of grass sprouting independently of each other. And those would be the phyla. Now within each phylum, there is subsequent diversification, but even there, I don't see the branches connecting that would make them a tree of life. As scientists, it's not our job to force the evidence into a theory that just doesn't fit it. And so I have absolutely no desire or reason to uphold Darwin's theory at this point.
So, Australopithecine, early Homo. Notice, if you will, this is not a transition. This would require 20 or 30 gradual changes to get in from this to this. It is an overnight change. It is just sudden. Boom. The Homos are here. I don't mean that like it sounds. Okay, next slide. All right, the Homos are here. Here we go. The Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo archaic, Homo neanderthal, and then Cro-Magnon, Homo sapiens, us. Notice Neanderthal man going back and through the Australopithecines don't look anything like us. Nothing. Here we sit right here. Another transition. Now remember, we had 4 million years Australopithecines, approximately 2 million years. There's some overlap in here. And then here, 120,000 years ago only, boom, here we are. Suddenly, overnight, looking nothing like anything that has come before. The bones of all of these creatures are much thicker than ours, just like Lucy's were. And in every way, the shapes are dissimilar. They do not have, it's hard to tell looking straight on, but they have no foreheads. Their foreheads go straight back off their huge brow ridges, neither of which we have. We have nice forehead here. We have no brow ridges. Huge, round, nocturnal vision eyes. So did the Australopithecines. These are primate eyes. Primates have this kind of eye. Huge, wide nasal passages indicating a big flat nose spread across the face. We've got our little uplift of bone sticking our nose off our face. We have rectangular, small, reduced eye sockets, very poor night vision. A dramatic change has occurred. The upper jaw sticks off the face. Ours squished in. Nothing like us. Next slide, please. Profiles show the degree of change is startling. Prognathous mouth, no chin. Prognathous mouth even more so, no chin, and then suddenly flat mouth, nice chin. Look at the change through here. Australopithecine, Homo erectus, Cro-Magnon. This is as big a leap from here to here as from here to here in anatomical terms. A light year, a light year. This is not a transition. These are transformations, despite what you are told by anthropologists. Next slide, please. Now, am I making it sound my way just because the heads go that way? No, let's look at a whole body. This is a Homo erectus called the Lake Turkana boy. Homo erectus, Lake Turkana boy. Now, notice, if you will, this guy's about 12 years old. His molars have not erupted yet. He already stands 5'8". He's going to grow to 6'6", maybe 7 feet in adulthood. We don't know how they grew. But already at 12 years old, he is a physically robust creature. Every bone in his body at 12 years old is far more robust, thicker, stronger than any bone in Arnold Schwarzenegger's body today. True. Now, why do you, notice too, if you will, the length of his upper arm. And he has some shoulder socket here, so they had to put it in the right place, so that forced them to put the fingertip pretty near where it belongs. It belongs a little bit lower, but pretty close. Now, what are bones like this all about? What's the deal here? Why are they so robust? Your bones are a function of the torque your muscles can generate. Your bones have to be able to withstand the pressure that your muscles can generate. And if not, your muscles would break your bones. So when you're looking at bones like this, you're looking at an incredibly powerful creature. What are you looking at? You're looking at primate bones, primates of the earth. This is how the primates are built. Gorillas, chimps, right on down the line. They are incredibly strong relative to us, are the primates. 5 to 10 times pound for pound. They can come, they'll come right out of the mother's womb, reach up, hands and feet, hook onto her belly, and she walks off. And they can hang on. Anybody's had a pet monkey knows what I'm talking about. Next slide. Okay, this is a chimpanzee minus its hair due to disease, so you can see the musculature in here. And the strength of these things is amazing. Amazing. You could take a male chimp like this, not a gorilla, and put it in a room with Mike Tyson. It's a battle to the death, and they both understand that. 2 or 3 minutes, this chimp is walking out. Now, he may be missing an ear or two. But the chimp is walking out. The chimp can tear him limb from limb, literally, apart. Understand that. Primate strength is nothing at all like human strength. Next slide. Same thing for Neanderthals, our supposedly closest nearest kin until just recently. Neanderthal fingertip bone, human fingertip bone. Segment of Neanderthal thigh bone, human thigh bone. Look at the difference. Not even close. This is quarters to dimes, shovel handles to broomsticks. No comparison. Our supposed, and we used to be told, absolutely, they insisted, they swore. We came directly from those guys. Even looking at this kind of evidence, that is what they insisted. Why? Because they have to explain it in terrestrial terms. Understand that science is hamstrung. They've painted themselves into a corner. They have to explain everything in terrestrial terms. They do not allow for outside intervention, whether that outside intervention is extraterrestrial or divine. And so they have to come up with explanations like this to suit the data, which doesn't at all support their conclusions. So, what if these guys lived in the primo niches, which they did because they were leaving fossils? And guess what? You leave fossils in the primo niches, in the prairies, savannas, grasslands, lightly wooded areas. Why? Because it's very unique that a fossil gets formed of this kind. because you have to die in very specific circumstances. You have to get caught in a flash flood so that your body is washed away, covered up by mud, so predators can't get you. Your flesh rots off, the minerals leach into your bones, and you become stone and you become a fossil. Or you get killed at the water hole. One day you're really tired, you're really hot, you're not paying attention, you go down to drink, the lion jumps on your back, kills you right there at the edge of the water hole, and then the wildebeest herd comes up behind him, run him off, stomp you down into the mud, and now same process. You're covered by mud, your flesh rots off, your bones are, the minerals leach into your bones, and you become a fossil, and that's it. And that's pretty much it. It's very hard to form a fossil otherwise. And so we see how miraculous that process is just to make them in the first place. And then, millions of years later, it washes up, or whenever it washes up, and somebody sees it that knows what it is and can recognize it and can save it. It's miracle stacked on miracle. That's why they're so few, and they're so rare, and they're so precious because of that. Now, understand this, that in the deep woods and jungles of the world, they don't make fossils. Doesn't happen. You get your water out of the environment. You don't have a water hole. You get out of your food and things like that. It will surprise you to know that there is not, to this day, a single solitary fossilized bone of a chimpanzee in the world that we know about. They just don't make fossils. So, and yet we are told in another one of these great fantasies that they were somehow created by people in ancient times, ancient Egyptians or ancient Sumerians or anybody. Somehow or other they did it. And it's just absolute malarkey. Impossible. Now, next slide. Some Egyptian scholars tried to prove it by getting down in with some pink granite here and wailing away with some stones for a few hours and tore their hands up and walked out of there saying, well, you know, we couldn't make much of a dent in it, but boy, you know, those old folks, they sure had a lot of time on their hands, and somehow they figured out a way to do it. Wouldn't give an inch after this. Wouldn't give an inch. It's ridiculous. Now, here's the stone they're working on. Next slide. Some of you may have seen this. This is an ancient 1,170-ton obelisk lies unfinished at the Aswan quarry. A crack rendered the stone unusable. It's pink granite. They were making it into an obelisk like the one you saw in Alan's slides. Okay? It's about 100 feet long. It's about 12 feet wide, 12 feet deep on the side. Imagine the Washington Monument just squared off. And it's pretty much done. But now let's move this from the Stone Age. Let's move it through the age of copper, because copper wouldn't make a dent in that. And let's move it into the Bronze Age. Bronze will chip on it. Bronze will take a little bit of it out. Now, let's put our bronze chisels or hatchets or whatever in the hands of some guys and get them down in this crack and put them to work. How do you think they're going to fare in there? Pretty tight fit. Plastic Man might have a tough time up in there. But the point is, they've got it pretty much done. They're working on the spire here. When they break it, you know how it works. You press here, you get this. Well, look, does this look like somebody chipping away with a little hand? No. This looks like a belt sander taking pieces out the size of the chair you're sitting on. Huge chunks of pink granite, one of the hardest stones in the world, just being ripped out. And they press too hard with whatever machine they've got here, and you know your physics. You get stress back here, and they popped it. They broke it. And they just said, whoops, we busted that one. And they just unhooked it and went somewhere else and left it for us to marvel at and wonder how they could have done it. But now let's go ahead and say they didn't bust it and they finished it. These primitive people now who managed somehow to do this. They finished it, it's ready to go. The hole, by the way, is about 15 feet deep. That's the top of it up there. But still, what's the first thing they've got to do? Somebody's got to draw straws to get down there with his hatchet and cut it loose from the bottom. Now, who's going to do that with 1,100 tons sitting on top of him? We could not get our best diamond-tipped blades to cut through underneath this thing. The weight would stop the blade. We could not. The operative word here is impossible. We could not get this out of here. And yet they did it time and time and time again. To lift it out, just if we could somehow cut it loose, we would have to take a dozen of our largest movable cranes to wring that hole just to get it up. You're being lied to, folks. That's the main thing you got to understand. You're being lied to. It's absolutely impossible. For this one stone proves that none of the megaliths were made by those people in that era. And this, again, is not the biggest one. They have them in Baalbek twice that big.
From its inception, the scientific proofs offered to support human evolution have been riddled with holes. In fact, just like the dubious sideshow examples touted by circus shysters, many of the earliest proofs were fraudulent, and modern research shows that many proofs were driven by scientific ignorance and evolutionary interpretations rather than solid evidence. However, the Bible is clear that many people attempt to deny the God of Scripture because of their unrighteousness, as a way to avoid personal judgment for their sin. In essence, many are willing to believe a lie rather than the truth if it suits their purpose. They become compliant with error and are willing to be deceived. Perhaps it's like the saying often attributed to P.T. Barnum says, "There's a sucker born every minute." Take Neanderthals, for example. In 1856, workmen digging in a cave in the Neander Valley, near Dusseldorf in Germany, discovered a fossilized skull cap, 2 femurs, and bone fragments. Examined by one Professor Schaffhausen, a professional anatomist, he concluded that they were fully human. However, 4 years later, after the release of Darwin's On the Origin of Species, the search for fossils of imagined ape-like ancestors of man increased with much vigor amongst naturalists. And lo and behold, Irish geologist William King decided to re-examine the fossil skull of Neanderthal man and see what he thought. His conclusion? Like other Darwinians of the day, he argued, against the professional opinion of an expert anatomist, that Neanderthal man was an ape-like creature. And so positive was he that he actually declared, "The thoughts and desires which once dwelt within it never soared beyond those of the brute." Such clairvoyant ability as to somehow perceive the fossilized thoughts emanating from a collection of bones demonstrates his obvious evolutionary bias. And this wild speculation wasn't simply against the opinion of one lone expert from across the aisle of human origin ideology. It flew in the face of no other than the great anatomist Rudolf Virchow, one of the most prominent physicians of the 19th century, who also argued that Neanderthals were fully human in every respect, with any abnormalities being the result of their suffering from rickets or arthritis. However, depictions of Neanderthals as stooped-over ape men began to proliferate evolutionary literature, and such representations were mimicked in the circuses and carnival freak shows of the day. The evolutionary mindset took hold of all sectors of society, becoming the evolutionary memes of their day. For example, in 1929, life-sized statues of bestial Neanderthals greeted visitors viewing Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History, and were only replaced relatively recently. After an overwhelming amount of evidence collected over the years proved that Neanderthals were simply powerfully built people, well within the modern range of human anatomy, they were replaced with more modern depictions, which today look like normal humans. A current Chicago Field Museum article states, "The first of 2 Neanderthal family dioramas were installed in 1929. In the early 1970s, the Neanderthal figures were replaced with new ones. By 1994, the Hall of the Stone Age of the Old World exhibit had been dismantled because most were considered to be scientifically inaccurate. The hall had included the Neanderthal family." So, despite their still being used as examples of our supposed primitive ancestors in popular movies and catchy commercials such as the "Simple Enough for a Caveman to Do It" series today, Neanderthals were never subhuman. That idea was always a false imposition applied upon the facts rather than derived directly from them. And perhaps the most definitive confirmation of this comes from no less than Dr. Eric Trinkhaus, a paleoanthropologist specializing in Neanderthals, early modern human biology, and human evolution. He's considered one of the world's foremost authorities on Neanderthal man, and he has concluded, detailed comparisons of Neanderthal skeletal remains with those of modern humans have shown that there's nothing in Neanderthal anatomy that conclusively indicates locomotor, manipulative, intellectual, or linguistic abilities inferior to those of modern humans. So, evolutionists used Neanderthals for approximately 175 years to lace the minds of millions with evolutionary ideas of proto-human derivatives, only to later affirm their full humanity. But what about other examples that have been offered to the public? The most famous hoax, and one that is much bemoaned among the evolutionary community, is the famous Piltdown Man. The supposed ape-man skull and jawbone was found in 1912 by a laborer digging in a gravel pit near the town of Piltdown in England. It was announced that both pieces came from the same ancient ape man and dubbed Piltdown Man. For 40 years, this supposed proof of human evolution was displayed in museum exhibits and textbooks as proof positive that human beings had descended from ape-like ancestors. With hand-drawn, supposed scientific images of what the creature must have looked like, all with amazing similarity to how the freak show missing links were portrayed, described, and depicted by their promotional artists as well. Only after 4 decades was the evidence re-examined and revealed as a fraud. And it wasn't even a good fraud, as one could easily see how the teeth from the jawbone had been filed down to make them look more human, and the bones had been chemically treated to make them look very old. It was simply a combination of an old human skull and a modern ape jawbone stuck together. We raise this example today not simply to rub it in that one evidence for evolution has been disproven, but to point out that the acceptance and promotion of such evidence by professionals for over 40 years can only be attributed to one of two things: pathetic scientific acumen displayed by the evolutionary scientists of the day, or an agenda that made people willing to overlook the obvious fraud to accomplish its ideologic goals. For hundreds of people involved in producing museum-grade copies of the exhibit, distributing them to various museums around the world, and producing numerous textbook diagrams and descriptions based on the evidence, all not to detect the fraud, seems highly suspicious or perhaps negligent at best. Now, just 5 years later, a Nebraskan rancher found what he thought was a special kind of tooth on his farm. And an evolutionist paleontologist friend of his was excited at the prospect that it might be from an ape man. Once again, an artist with a healthy helping of evolutionary imagination produced a portrait of Nebraska Man, a hairy ape man, along with his ape woman wife, complete with an ape woman bob cut, apparently to make her appear feminine but not too feminine. Several years later, scientists confirmed that the tooth had come from a type of pig. The whole fiasco had nothing to do with apes or people. It had everything to do with evolutionary presuppositions that drove false conclusions, all based on laughably flimsy evidence. Much as how the carnivals cycled through the unfortunate ape-men performers of the past, a whole slew of proposed human ancestors have come and gone over the years as a carousel of caveman candidates have been proposed, debunked, reassigned, or removed from the forefront of human evolutionary thought. Cro-Magnon, Peking Man, Java Man, Ramapithecus, all of these were once shouted from the proverbial rooftops in both popular news articles and serious scientific publications as proof of evolution, only to later lose favor among the more progressive evolutionary community. Currently popular candidates such as Homo erectus are not faring much better under scrutiny. Although smaller than the average human is today, the brain size is within the range of modern people, and studies of the middle ear have shown that Homo erectus walked just as we do. There's nothing about their skeletons that fall outside of the normal human range, and their remains have been found in the same strata near ordinary Homo sapiens, clear evidence that they lived together. Given the range of heights, sizes, and features that we see among the fully human race today, they're not exactly anything to write your evolutionary thesis about. However, there's still one very popular contender often discussed, the famous fossil find called Lucy. Australopithecus afarensis, popularly known as Lucy, is still the most well-known modern example of supposed human evolution today. She was once much touted as our supposed ancestor, and uniquely named because of the Beatles song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It was playing when she was assembled by the team that found her in Ethiopia. However, her star has faded. For example, one of the main reasons evolutionists suggest that Lucy walked on 2 feet instead of all 4s like the ape she resembles is that she was found near a set of fossilized human-looking footprints in a rock layer that they believed had formed at the time Lucy lived, but dated as older than human existence. They then concluded that these footprints must have come from Lucy's kind, and museum reconstruction gave her human-looking feet. However, they later found such tracks a full 932 miles, nearly 1,500 kilometers, away from Lucy's bones in Tanzania. A far better explanation is that their evolutionary assumptions are just wrong, and that they're simply a set of human footprints that have nothing to do with the cobbled-together group of bones called Lucy, that aren't necessarily even collected from the same creature. You see, many laypersons likely imagine that specimens like Lucy were found in a heap and carefully retrieved as a somewhat articulated skeleton that clearly shows these ape-like hominids in similar form to how their reconstructions are shown in books and museum replicas. However, her skeleton is only 40% complete. A 2015 New Scientist article reported, "A careful look at the ancient hominin skeleton suggests that one bone may actually belong to a baboon." Now, statues portraying Lucy in museums to this day display her walking upright with human-like hands and feet. However, when Lucy was found, she didn't have hands, just 3 left hand bones that were incomplete and not human-like, or feet whatsoever. These depictions were assumed based off of the footprints found 1,500 kilometers away, with no other physical evidence whatsoever. And scientists have since found other, more complete skeletons of such Australopithecines, which do include hand and feet bones. And from them, we can make a safe guess that Lucy's hands had long, curved fingers, suited for climbing in trees, and that Lucy's feet had opposable toes seen in the hand-like feet of apes that could easily grab and climb. She didn't have human-like feet. Detailed studies of the inner ears, skulls, and bones suggest that Lucy and her like were not in fact transitioning to human anytime soon. They may have walked more upright than most apes, but not like humans. Once all of the evolutionary ideologies and interpretations are stripped away, Australopithecus afarensis is very similar to a pygmy chimpanzee. A key to understanding all of this can be found in one of the more famous attractions of the Pickard's Museum, Trongate, circa 1908. In the character that was known as Solomon the Man Monkey. In a reversal of the typical missing link sideshow attractions, Solomon was an actual chimpanzee, dressed up in men's Victorian finery and allowed to wander around. People were amused at the absurdity of seeing an ape aping a man, and he too was touted as Darwin's missing link. In essence, these examples demonstrate both ends of the spectrum of man's attempts to provide evidence for human evolution. Naturalists have looked for the most human-looking ape fossils they can find, or conversely, the most ape-like human fossils possible. However, as Kipling said, "Oh, east is east, and west is west, and never the twain shall meet." The fact is that Darwin's missing links are still missing because they never existed. Men were specially created in the image of God. Sadly, belief in deceptive evolutionary ideas have led many people to conclude that the God of the Bible doesn't exist, much to the detriment of mankind.
Congregation, settle in your seats. The Reverend Frontalot is on the mic and about to speak. I'm about to freak you out, make you shiver in the pew while I'm delivering to you my sermon and divinity ensued. Brought by the one true God, it's a fact. Anybody else who ever had a God, their God's whack. We ain't gotta worry about him, we picked the right horse. You're in the right house of worship, of course. And forces are gathering out in the world to diminish our faith in ways radical and thorough, to discourage us from loving anything that's immaterial, to tempt our children with ever fruitier cereal, and worst of all, to call us idiots while they do it. My congregation, listen, I'm about to walk you through it. We're gonna take the nation back from the heathens that's within it. We're gonna get the most egregious of the atheists in prison, cause a schism while we're at it, but emerge on top. And once we purified our ranks, we won't stop. We'll purify your minds of what's illegitimately thought. It's not to be a battle indiscriminately fought, but an orchestrated effort, and I'm gonna need you to commit. Might take a couple generations for this deviltry to quit. Start with the kids, in fact, they get distracted from the Lord. So I'd like you to write a couple letters to your school board.
Do you really believe we were nothing but the monkeys swinging up in the trees? Don't it seem a little likelier that Adam and Eve did a lot of humping and that was the origin of the species? Do you really believe we were nothing but the monkeys swinging up in the trees? Don't it seem a little likelier that Adam and Eve did a lot of humping and that was the origin of the species?
What has this so-called science ever done for us? But trumpeted that when ashes go to ashes and dust to dust, despite the fuss of living, energy gets conserved, denying the weight of the soul of a man. This is ill-deserved. This is still the curse of Copernicus that we suffer. Secular thought ought not to overflow its buffer and run roughshod through the minds of you, the population. Heretics such as Dawkins and Sagan overstep their station to say that what we see and what we believe should be confluent. Look to your reverend to end apostasy. It's what I'm doing. Look to your holy book to light the way. That is its purpose. Open it up and you'll find Eden for you even scratch the surface. Sure, this should be mirrored in the textbooks verbatim, but I'm not in a position yet to issue ultimatum. So I lay down my scheme. We'll make it seem as though creation isn't anything we'd like to interject to education. We'll wrangle up the language, science, data, theorem, the irreducible complexity of the ears we use to hear them, gnashing teeth and wailing from Kansas to PA. Yes, my flock, I talk of futures not imminent but underway. Already established an institute for discovery. Discovered that Darwin is dead with outlook grim for recovery. School moms will soon say that he burns in a fiery sea. Think how much like paradise that's gonna be.
Do you really believe we were nothing but the monkeys swinging up in the trees? Don't it seem a little likelier that Adam and Eve did a lot of humping and that was the origin of the species?